Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everybody and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. Today I have another special guest, someone else who I've met on LinkedIn, and I'm really happy that she's here today. So Isabelle, perhaps you could start by telling us something about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation today. So my name is Isabelle Cottenet. I'm a French pronunciation coach and a translator from English and German into French. Today, I help non-native French speakers master the rhythms and sounds of the French language to sound clear and confident. I've been delving into the relationship between languages and music for over 20 years, and today I use a combination of tools drawn from my background in linguistics, phonetics, music, and vocal technique to create an enjoyable, efficient, and supportive journey into French pronunciation for my students. I offer individual and group online classes focused on phonetics and pronunciation. I work with interpreters, translators, language instructors, but also corporate professionals, freelancers, and singers who want to improve their French pronunciation and be better understood.
Oh, so you've got that connection with music and the work that you do. So I imagine that would be particularly helpful for the singers, for example, to have somebody who's really interested in this area of music and language pronunciation. Then that's like an extra selling point for you rather than someone who doesn't really know anything about this subject.
Yes, and it also helps me to really listen to them. And when I work with singers, it's a really pleasant experience. They send me the music sheets before I study the music sheet, and I listen to recordings of other artists to get a feeling of the sounds they want to produce. And I had the chance of working with an opera singer, and we worked on French repertoire from the French opera repertoire, and yes, both aspects, the language and the music aspects were, I worked together with them.
Okay, so are a lot of your customers in France people that have moved there, or are there people who are working internationally and need French in their jobs?
Today I work with, the majority are based in France and in Europe, I would say, in Germany, in the UK, and in France for to avoid a major jet lag. So it's a bit more difficult to work with Americans. I have one American student based in the US, so the courses take place in the evening for me and in the morning for him. And I had once an Australian student, so that's
so did I.
complicated.
That was hard, especially in the winter or is it the other way around? But either way, the time changed, and then it was even harder. You have to get up really early, and they stay up really late. It's not ideal for me. So I'm the same. I have 3 time zones of mine, Central European, and then I have some people in Romania too, but that's only a difference of 2 hours, and I can cope with that, but I don't want to start having to calculate a 9 or 10 hour difference. That's a lot. That's but I mean, you've obviously got a lot of experience. You've been doing this for some time. Where did it all start for you, the interest in languages and pronunciation and other languages?
The interest in languages started when I was a child or young teenager. We had the opportunity to move to the United States when I was 14. My dad got a job there, so I went to American school in the morning, and the first day when I arrived, I could just speak maybe 2 or 3 sentences, like the cat is on the table.
Because you need that at school, right? There's so many cats on the table at school.
So that was actually my first real introduction to language, and having to communicate and to go to school. I mean, you're forced to learn the language, and you learn it faster when you're a child. So that was probably the way I got into languages. And then a few years later, well, many years later, I decided to study translation. So that's when I entered a translation and interpreting school in Paris and studied translation for 4 years. And afterwards, well, after 10 years working in the corporate world, I decided to go freelance as a translator. So I've been working as a translator for 22 years now. And the interest in phonetics and pronunciation came back to me during the pandemic, I think, because I was trying to really find a way of working with languages and with music, because I've been doing music ever since I was a child, so singing and playing the piano. And pronunciation was a great way to combine both, actually, because you need to be able to hear the things that can or need to be improved. And you also need to get into the music of a language in order to master the pronunciation and the intonations. And so today I use this background in music to listen to my students, but also to create some tools, learning tools based on music, rhythms, and so I select songs for their relevance from a phonetics point of view. So I don't do that with every student, because some students do not like to sing or are not comfortable, but to those who would like to and who are open to it, we work on songs. And I must say the results are really, really encouraging. And the students I've worked with, the students I've offered to work on songs have been very satisfied with the results. So it's a good teaching support material, I say.
I can imagine this helps, because I think one of the things that we sometimes neglect when learning languages is listening to our voice, speaking the other language, feeling comfortable with it. I know that's something that I've had to work on with, particularly with newer languages, because it is unusual at the beginning to hear your voice speaking another language. Yeah. Especially if it doesn't sound like you, because if it sounds a bit more hesitant or a bit more reluctant, and that's not how you normally speak. But I think really if we want to develop our voice in that other language, because I think for every new language there is, it's a new part of us to discover and to explore, but we need to be willing to listen to that voice, to hear that voice, and to become comfortable with it. And I can imagine that music is a really good way to do that, because you're focusing a bit more on the music as well, so not entirely on I have to listen to myself speaking this language, but also if you're enjoying yourself, enjoying the music, it's a more enjoyable way to get used to hearing yourself speaking the other language, unless you really hate singing, I guess. But if you like music, and I think that's also a way to learn vocabulary and all kinds of other stuff, but I can imagine that it does help people to really feel more comfortable and to think about the sounds that they need to produce to sing correctly.
Yeah, I don't know if it's easier to listen to yourself singing, because this is something that I found very hard when I learned, vocal technique. We were asked to record ourselves and
that's different.
Listen to ourselves. That's the hard part, but it's a really efficient way of correcting yourselves, because you can hear what is wrong, actually. So I ask my students very often to record themselves, not singing necessarily, but reading out loud, and to listen to themselves afterwards. And that's a very, very good way to practice. But back to what you were saying about songs, yes, they are very often used to learn new vocabulary, to learn about the culture of the country as well, because some songs were written in a particular context. And not as often used, for pronunciation purposes. And the way I got in, I didn't have this idea. I didn't come up with this idea by myself. I read some studies by, there was a famous opera singing teacher who was also a phonetician from Italy. And he wrote a few papers on the topic that I found really interesting. Mm-hmm. And because you can use a song to work on a particular sound. So when you find songs that rhyme with words ending with the same sound, that's useful. But also to feel the rhythm. And I think, although I only teach French pronunciation, I mostly sing in English. So when I work on my songs in English, I really have to pay a lot of attention to the rhythm, to the dynamics. And this is something that you are not taught in school when you learn a language, that there is a very specific music and rhythm for each language. And it's very different. And the way a song sounds in English or in French or in German, because I know you speak German, it's very different and has to do with the underlying structure of the language.
And I think that's the same for spoken language as well. Sometimes something can be right, but if the rhythm is off somehow, or the emphasis is in the wrong place, sometimes you have to think, what did that person just say? Like, what was that? Even if the pronunciation was okay, it makes you stop and think sometimes, and that's just about really listening, because I think there's a lot of emphasis in language courses on listening as a way to, you have to hear some information, then you have to write down what you heard or answer questions about it. But listening is a lot more than that. I think it's a very narrow emphasis that we have, and it's unhelpful in many ways. But there is a lot more to listening, because it's also connected with speaking. So if you don't listen properly, you're not going to speak well, because you don't understand the sounds that you're supposed to be able to replicate.
Absolutely. And listening depends on what you mean by listening. There are so many things that you can listen to. For instance, if I just take the example of a song. In a song, some people will listen more to the melody or will pay more attention to the lyrics. Some will pay attention to the voice quality, or to the music part, to the instruments. So if you listen to a speech, you also can listen to many different aspects in the way people talk. Okay, the sounds, isolated sounds. Okay, the intonation, the voice. Does it crack? Does it go up, down? Does it go back and forth a lot, like in English, when you have to really put the stress on the right syllables, which is not the case in French. So maybe if we just ask the student to listen to one particular thing in a speech, in a video, in a song, this is a good way of training your ear to pay attention to things that you never paid attention to before.
Yeah, because we're all so different. I was always a lyrics girl, like as a child, and I would listen to songs and I'd say, that's a terrible song. Why are you listening to that song? They just said, and some of my friends, well, I don't know what they just said. I just like the music. But I've always been really focused on what people are actually saying and communicating. But yeah, you can listen to the same thing in many different ways. So moving on from there to, I know it's a very general subject, but in terms of if we as language learners want to improve our pronunciation of English or whichever language, what are some good tips to help people to be more mindful of how they're speaking, to focus on their pronunciation more and to improve it?
Okay. To answer that, I would need maybe to define what pronunciation is. We tend to think that it's only the sounds, the isolated sounds, but some phoneticians, teachers of phonetics, include the prosody aspect. So meaning the stress patterns, the intonations, the pauses, so these aspects are a part of pronunciation. So when you want to work on your pronunciation, you'll be working on all these aspects, because pronunciation supports communication in a way. Also the linking and chaining and the connected speech, this is all part of pronunciation. And first, to answer your question, I need to ask another question. Why would you want to improve your pronunciation? There may be different motivations to that, either because you don't feel comfortable producing certain sounds, or because you feel people do not understand you, or because you're a language professional and you feel and you want to fine-tune your pronunciation. So depending on your motivation, the approach will be different. If someone who is, not everyone needs to learn everything about phonetics to improve their pronunciation. There could be a long journey, a thorough journey, and a shorter, more focused journey in order to improve one's pronunciation. The person would need to understand the differences between the pronunciation in his or her native language and the pronunciation of the target language. I think that would be the first thing, because as you were saying before, you can't pronounce right something that you don't hear properly. So if there are sounds that do not exist in your native language, then you will have to train your ear to listen to them, to hear them, and you will have to train your ear to distinguish sounds that are really close one from another, like the short E and the long E in English, like sheep and ship. So if your language doesn't make the distinction between short vowels and long vowels, this is one thing that you will need to pay attention to. The other thing that you need to identify is the rhythms in your native language and your target language. What makes them different? What makes it different? And the intonation, same thing. So you have to identify the differences between the systems and to select things that you will want or need to work on, and to prioritize those depending on how badly they affect your clarity when you speak.
Yeah, because I know that I've had some customers with very specific challenges that they've come about in relation to English, mainly with sounds that don't exist in other languages, and they've known that, but other people have just said that they know that other people find it difficult to understand them. And I guess some of that isn't always necessarily the pronunciation, but the other things that you mentioned, like when people are nervous, they tend to speak really quickly, or they don't take enough pauses. So maybe it's not so much that, but it's just that their delivery needs to be worked on. But for example, when we were talking earlier, like the TH sound is a big problem for a lot of people, the English, because we have two. And yeah, people with different first languages have different challenges with that, but it's something that doesn't exist in the lot of languages of the people within my work. So that tends to be one of the worst offenders for English. How would you advise somebody to work on something like that, this group of letters that can be a challenge?
Okay, so I don't teach English. I just teach French. But if I revert what I would do for French, what I often say is that you have to make pronunciation something visible, physical, and hearable. So when you make it visible, the person would need to observe what a native speaker does with his mouth or her mouth and tongue when producing the TH sound, and to feel it too. So the TH sound, there's a voiced version where the vocal cords vibrate, like in leather, for instance, if I'm correct. And so maybe just giving cues, visible cues. Okay, you need to place your tongue just behind your upper teeth, make it stick a little bit, put your hand on your throat to feel the vibration, and to make the student feel the difference between the leather and think, where when you pronounce the TH in think, the vocal cords do not vibrate. So just to make it feelable, to show what the mouth and explain what the tongue does. And then supposing that the person hears the difference between the two sounds. And then practice in a very systematic way with words, word pairs, to really train the speech muscles. So that would be an approach. So very systematic, and also speaking to different senses to get a complete image or perception of the sound.
Yeah, and I guess to also be aware of what you're doing, because when we were talking about this before, you were saying some French speakers may produce different sounds instead of this, so to be aware of the incorrect sound as well as the sound that you're going for, so that you can, to be aware what the mistakes are, so you can also try and avoid them and focus on the sound that you're trying to produce. Yes. Or maybe it's just something that people feel uncomfortable with themselves, like if they know that there's a sound that they find particularly hard in a language, and they try to avoid that group of letters or say things in a different way. If it's affecting you that much, then it's good to address it, because it will make your life easier. You don't have to think, oh, what word can I use so that I don't have to say this particular word that I want to avoid?
Yes, that's true. I mean, if you avoid saying certain words because of the pronunciation, then there are ways to address that in a very systematic way. And you just need to find either the proper resources, or to have the proper plan or proper feedback to help you correct the sound. Because it could be a simple thing like the way you place your tongue in your mouth, or if you don't open your jaw enough, or because the way we shape the vowels in French is different from the way they are shaped in English. So just by working on the way you shape your mouth will help. So that would be the physical approach. Or maybe you don't hear the sound properly, so training your ear will help you understand where the discomfort might come from.
Yeah, and even if it's a group of letters that you have, or like I was thinking yesterday about the letter D, how I pronounce it in English, or what my tongue does when I pronounce the letter D in English, like dog, and it's not the same when I speak Romanian. The tongue moves. So even if you think, oh yeah, I know that letter, I know that group of letters, it's worth thinking about it again, just to be aware of even things you think in another language. They are different. Your whole structure of your face, your position of your tongue, your lips, how you move your jaw, it's different, and it's important to focus on those things so that you can try and replicate the sounds that you're hearing.
Absolutely. But some people will be able to correct their pronunciation very easily and quickly if you explain the from an articulatory point of view. So when you explain the articulation, the resonance, where the sound resonates, where the airflow goes, but some people will not respond to those explanations. So you have to find other routes. You are a language specialist, so you are used to paying attention, or you want to pay attention to those very specific movements that the different speech muscles and organs do. But some people, that's not the way to go. So for those, we need to find other strategies. So it would be more to play more with the sounds of the language, as an actor would do. So to really help them develop their imitation skills. So by watching videos and trying to also imitate the body language that will support the sound also. Like right now, I'm using my hands. I'm speaking and making a wheel movement with my hands because it gives me the energy that is needed in English, for instance. See, and because French is more narrow, and the rhythm is really flowing. It's like a string quartet. But in English, then I would need more energy. So to approach it from with a more musical intention, I'd say. With some people, it works.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that definitely works. And I think that you've shared a lot of really useful tips here, both for people learning English and for people learning other languages, because a lot of these can be applied to other languages, because it's about how you approach the subject and how you think about these things. And I think sometimes we make mistakes just because we don't think about things enough. So I think it's definitely helpful to take a closer look at this and how we approach this. Where is the best place for people to find you if they want to find out more about your work and what you're doing, or to contact you? Where do you like to spend time online?
At the moment, I'm on LinkedIn only.
Yeah, that's where we met.
I focus on one platform because I share a lot of things through my carousels and posts, a lot of things on pronunciation, music, the links between both. I'm currently making a website, but it's not ready yet. I will let you know when it's ready.
I can always add it to our page when it's finished. I can add the link.
Okay.
And for now, I'll certainly add LinkedIn so that people can come and find you, find out more about you.
Okay, thank you. I had a list of small tips. I don't know if you want me to.
Yeah, sure.
No? Yeah. So I prepared a small list. So my quick tips to help you improve your pronunciation or work on your pronunciation. You need first to don't learn pronunciation only from books. You need to experiment to speak. So tackle one thing after the other. The key to success is focused practice. So identify the sounds or the rhythms you want to work on and pick a different type of drill. So to train your listening skills, you could work on minimal pairs. That's a really good and efficient way. You could also listen to songs and try to sing along. The second thing you need to work on, we talked about this, is to train your speech muscles. I often talk about the smile workout to prepare your speech muscles for French. So it's like saying an E sound and U, so smiling and pouting your lips. So this will train these muscles. You can also train for French to really round your lips and push them forwards. This is not a combination of muscles that you use very often in English. So you can, train your speech muscles. Then third thing you could do, I was talking about the body language. So observe what the native speakers do with their mouth, imitate, film yourself, observe and watch what you do. So the body language will help you with the dynamics and to get into the version of yourself in the other language. So then when you start to practice on your pronunciation, a really good way to do that is to read out loud and record yourself and use the script when you prepare your reading. You could use a color code or whatever way you want, whichever way you want to, let's say you want to practice on your nasal vowels. So say, I will color all the on sounds in French in green, the on sound in another color, etc. So you spot every sound in the every word that contains the sound that you want to work on. And using colors has been helpful for some students. And then you read out loud, you record yourself, you listen to yourself, and you try to identify where it was correct and where it can still be improved. So working with the script is really, really helpful. And the last thing is to work on your fluency, on the connected speech, is to use one technique that interpreters use is to shadow. So shadowing is repeating what a speaker says with a slight delay. Okay, don't go as far as interpreters do and translate in another language. Just start by, you select an audio file or a video, then you repeat after each sentence, you pause after each sentence. That's level 1. And again, you select one aspect that you want to work on, okay? And then if you want to take it to the next level, you don't pause anymore. You just repeat and keep the flow, keep the speech flowing. If it's too fast, you can slow it down. On YouTube, for instance, you can use the little wheel to slow down the speed. And this will really help you get the intonations and the stress patterns right. These were my few tips to help you with pronunciation.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Both the idea with using a script, for example, and the shadowing, they do not rely on the other person being able to create language in the other language, because I think that's why a lot of people confuse pronunciation with their ability to produce language, or they don't separate them out in terms of practice. And I think that's really important. So if you're reading a script, it's not, did I make a mistake? Because it's not your script, it's not your text. And the same with shadowing. It's not about can you think of the right words, or is the sentence constructed in a good way? You're not looking at that, you're just looking at the pronunciation. And I think that's really important, and something we don't do as language learners or as language teachers. I think courses don't put enough emphasis on this. So yeah, thank you for the tips, and I think that's definitely I will be using some of them because I am a learner as well as a teacher, so that's really good. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been really useful. I enjoy speaking with you because you have so many cool ideas that I hadn't considered before, and that's really useful. And I think it's also good how you can come together with other language professionals who are maybe not working in the same area as you, or even with the same language combinations. But a lot of this information is useful whichever language you're working on, and I'm sure that a lot of the English learners who listen to this podcast will benefit from the tips as well. So thank you again. It's been really good to see you. And
thank you, Kirsty, for having me. I had a good time, and I hope, some of it will be useful.
Absolutely. So have a great day, and maybe you'll come back sometime in the future. That would be great.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Thank you, Kirsty. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.